Does anyone have any questions? I'm sure you do, sir. But does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, what happened to your wife?
Well, she come down here. She lived with us. She was amazing. I fell ill back in England at Oates Manor. Had a high fever, and some thought I was near to die. And she was assigned to be my nursemaid. So when I woke up from that fever, that was the first angel I saw. She passed away before I did. She gave me 6 children. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. What happened during the latter part of your life here?
Heartbreak, profit, preferment. Plymouth had gotten into dispute with the Wampanoag over land and real estate, which is what it's all about, isn't it? More bigger bowls of gruel and more land to live on, even though they can't use it. Turned into fighting in between the Wampanoag and Plymouth. And the Wampanoag did send their old men, women, and children to go live with the Narragansett as refugees to get out of harm's way. And the Narragansett did take them in, for that is the honorable thing to do. Philip and 80 warriors maintained a small level of war, raiding houses, burning of haystacks, and things like that against the English. In October of 1675, Boston did demand that the Narragansett sign a treaty that they would remain neutral and not engage in this war. The Narragansett were not going to get into this war. And they were confused that why is Massachusetts Bay demanding that we say that we're going to be neutral? And the best I could explain to them that when we're in trouble, all English are all one Englishman. The Narragansett agreed. They would sign this treaty. They would stay neutral in this war. They put their signatures to this. And as their representatives are coming back down to their territory, a new demand was given from Massachusetts Bay that they were to turn over the Wampanoag refugees as hostages. Can you think of a more dishonorable thing to do? You've given them refuge. You're treating them because they need a home, and now you must give them over as hostages to Massachusetts? They refused. Their answer may have come out harsh because they were offended that they would be asked to do this. The answer was not a Wampanoag nor the paring of a Wampanoag's nail, which Massachusetts took to be a sign that they would side with the Wampanoag in the springtime, for this was October. So Boston, Plymouth, and the Connecticut colonies, called the United Colonies, to devise a plan to attack the Narragansett in their stronghold, the southern part of this colony. They did land troops at Mr. Smith's trading post down there. 1,000 soldiers in the middle of winter, in the middle of a blizzard. Howling winds and heaping snow, drifting everywhere. They did march over 12 miles inland, guided by another Indian, into the great swamp, which is now frozen. They did come upon a fort that was huge. 5 acres, 500 Weetus inside of it. Built like an English fort, not a native fort. Don't think about it like that. It had blockhouses outside of it. It had bastions sticking out so there was crossfire that they could do. This was an English-style fort. They knew how to fight English ways. And the English did attack this fort. They were driven back, and they did attack again, and were driven back a third time. The third time they tried to go in, there was a gap in the walls. They had not been able to finish it, and they rush in there. And with some dispute, they're firing at native peoples in their Weetus, and the bullets are bouncing off them, off the Weetus. The bark on the outside was bouncing the bullets off. And they said the only way we can beat this is to set fire to it. And they did. Over 700 men, women, and children perished in that fire. The war leader of the Narragansett, Cananchet, formed an army of 2,000 warriors in the southern part of the state. Then he went up into central Massachusetts, formed another army of almost 2,000 warriors. And they did march up the west side of Narragansett Bay, burning everything English. And they came to Providence. And on the great plain up here, those 2,000 warriors arrayed themselves and shouted out that they wished to talk. Myself and Captain Venner came down here and were shouting across the river to them, talking back and forth. I did start by scolding them, telling them they were behaving badly. They did agree they were in a strange place. Then I said, out of somewhere, that they're not good fighters. If we had 100 English against 100 of them, we'd beat them any day. They did say, bring 100 English up to the plain tomorrow morning. We will see. So I had to go back to what I did best, is negotiate. I said, give me your demands. I will write them down. We'll have a runner up to Boston and have an answer in a day or so before anyone else has to die. Their answer was, talk to us in a month after we burn Plymouth. We tried talking more, but there was nothing more to say. For remember, I said when the English are in trouble, we're all one Englishman. And that's now how they were treating us. It was time to go. Instead of going by the street, they did want me to go by the water's edge back to the blockhouse. Because some of the younger Indians on this side may not know me well and might cause me some mischief. This war went on for a short time, but at the end of it, there were over 700 native peoples captured and held in Newport. Some my close friends. What do you do with them? Most of the English want them slain immediately. Some groups surrendering had come in under the flag of truce with paperwork saying that they had already surrendered and were told to report to such and such a place. And the English slaughtered them where they stood. So now, the entire population, English population of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations is a mere 1,500 people. There's 700 natives captive down in Newport. What do you do with them? Everyone has lost family, their homes, their livelihoods. Everyone has lost something. And the English are angry. What do you do? Suggestions? You can't let them go. We'll start the war up again.
Don't they send some off on ship to different places?
Sell them into slavery.
That's their worst nightmare. Many of them had said they would rather die than go to the Caribbean. But that's what we did with them. I could not kill my friends. Sometimes in war, there are no good answers. That's why it should be avoided at all costs. Because it costs you everything.
So now you speak like a Quaker.
No, there are times when it is necessary, but it is the last thing you should do. What's more precious than our own lives?
Oh, I agree.
It's not that you should never raise your hand in defense, but that you should pick that time as being the very last thing that you can do. You do not go about and say, I like that piece of property there, I shall take it from them and use right of conquest.
Is that what the Quakers did?
The Quakers did not believe in fighting at all.
Right.
At all. They would not raise their hand in defense if one of the others had come and said, I like this land, we will take it from you. They would not raise their hand then, even. But in self-defense, in defense of family and home, this is a valid thing to do, to defend yourself. But it is not something you take lightly. Yes, Mom?
Apart from your opinion about these wars, what is your relationship with this historical site called Smith's Castle? It's near Whitford Village.
I know where it is.
And I was wondering, why did you get involved with that when you had a port here? You went for Whitford Harbor for some reason.
Well, it's not Whitford Harbor.
Or
It's
that area.
Kokomskasuk itself with the stream.
Yeah.
This is at the edge of Narragansett homeland. This was my trading post with the Narragansett. They would come to me there on their major highway. That's the same road as this. They would come there and meet with me, and I would trade their English goods with them. It is a quiet spot with fresh water, good land, where you can sit back and relax for a while. It is cooler there than here in the summer. So it was my trading post. And Richard Smith did buy it from me, that land there, and built his own dwelling house down there. He did buy it for me to afford myself to go back to England that first time. Now, I think Richard Smith building a full-time dwelling house there is out of his mind. It's at the edge of Narragansett homeland.
Did I understand correctly that the slavery that did exist in Rhode Island, plantations, emanated from that port, the trading post?
The slavery that was here was someone that was in debt. They would be, let's put it this way, involuntary indenture. It lasts for a period of time. But there is no perpetual slavery in Rhode Island.
And were you witness to this?
1642, that became a law, that there shall be no perpetual slavery in Rhode Island. This was a place, I mean, it is what people did at the end of a war, is take people into slavery, capture people. It stops having an insurrection, if you will. This is fair common practice, but it is not forever for them, and it's not for their children. Yes, sir.
Roger, I don't have a question for you. I have a comment. First of all, I think you should all be honored to spend any time with Roger Williams. I think we should owe him a tremendous applause for what we've learned today. Come on. He's very humble. By the time he finished at Pembroke, by the time he met Mr. Judge Cook, he was a stenographer for 6 years. From the time he was 12 to 18. He did stenography for the highest courts in England, James I, Francis Bacon, hundreds and hundreds of litigant cases. And by the time he became 18 and the judge decided you needed some education, more than the fact that he probably lived with Judge Cook, spelled Cook, whereas Cook, and therefore had access to his library for those 8 years. He then went to Charterhouse and won one of the highest educational prizes he could get there.
Yeah.
And then he went to Pembroke College, which you know is this college that this college up here is named for. And there he learned French, Dutch, Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. And there are even stories told about you learning Dutch and French from immigrants in his neighborhood where he lived. And what's more than that is that when he became the pastor, the domestic chaplain for the Mashams, Lady Masham was Joan Barrington's daughter. Joan Barrington was Oliver Cromwell's aunt. And so because of those associations, again, he's very shy to tell you this, he was protected by the most powerful and richest separatist Puritan group in England, the rich Barrington Hildesham group. That's why he was untouchable. He knew very well that if he kept this up, they would have cut his ears off. They would have split his nose. They would have put a hole in his tongue. But they didn't. They didn't. And without the pressure, now there are PhD theses, Roger, I don't know if you know about this, written in 1932, about the fact that Lady Barrington was considered the mother confessor for all of Puritans in New England. That's power. It's power they had. So, Roger, you're very shy about your credentials and your great, incredible accomplishments. Every year from 1636 to 1650, 53, 54, actually, we can get the good things, he has got to work stopping Connecticut from taking our land, stopping Massachusetts from taking our land, stopping Plymouth from taking our land. And he did his best with the relationship he had with the indigenous people. And he didn't even mention his other famous book, which was The Key to Language in America, where he actually translates Algonquin. Not only does he translate Algonquin, but he gives you all a little explanation of every phase of human life in the Indian family. And then he wrote a poem. He writes poems. And one of the most famous lines from those poems, Roger, I don't know if you remember it, I'm going to give it a shot, but something like Englishmen and Indians are equal. And in many of his little poems, he refers to the English and Dutch debauchery, which he doesn't. I'm all done.
Let
now.
me do that poem for you. I do know it.
Roger, I'm surprised you know it so long ago.
Boast not proud, English, of thy birth and blood. Thy brother Indian is by birth as good. Of one blood God made him and thee and all, as wise, as fair, as strong, as personal.
I believe Mr. Williams here is the inventor of the Constitution, and that Charles Lidford Fisher says in the book The Decoding of America that Roger Williams creates the first secular government in the history of the modern world. And here's one more thing for you to take home, Roger, because you may not know this after you die. But a young old man named John Locke moved into the Masham residence and lived there from 1668 to 1704 when he died. So people say there's no connection between Locke and Roger, even though he's in the building and he's the person who's his landlord, Sir Masham, William Masham, is the Masham's grandson. And the woman that is married to Mrs. Masham, Mr. Masham, is in fact the first valid English women's philosopher. So we are dealing here, Rogers. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all, folks.
Thank you.